Beautiful couple. Good morning, guys. Nice call. Welcome. Also been touring?
That's this one here.
No, I mean, do you have those ready?
They're sold like this.
Okay.
Segment. We print it 3 on the same sheet, but then it's cut. Yeah. All right, if you guys want to slide down the rail a little bit so you can see. You slide down towards the middle, guys. That's where you're going to actually see best.
Thanks, Tom. They got you really late. Bless their heart.
All right, guys. So welcome to the printing office. What you're looking at here is a recreation of an 18th century printing business. Now, it is not Benjamin Franklin's. Benjamin Franklin did print in 18th century Philadelphia, but unfortunately the buildings that he worked in, guys, no longer stand. So this is a recreation, but it gives you a very accurate idea of what it would have looked like. So if you had walked into Franklin's printing office, guys, this is the type of equipment you would have seen. This was the typical press, guys, that was used in the American colonies. Now, obviously, this is a replica today, so I can demonstrate it. I can show you how it works. If this was a 200-year-old press, we're not going to be using it, guys. But this is a replica. It's a faithful replica. It looks the same, operates the same as it would have 200 years ago. And what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to print it. We're going to show you how this job was actually done. Now, the most time-consuming part of the job, guys, in the 18th century was the typesetting or the composing. The first thing you would have to do if you wanted to print something is you would have to actually create the text of that document. So say you want to do something like the Pennsylvania Gazette, which was Franklin's newspaper, or Poor Richard's Almanac, his yearly publication. The first thing you had to do, guys, is you had to put that document together. So you would start over here, guys, in the composing area. Those are type cases, and they're filled with everything I need. Letters, punctuation marks, numbers, symbols. You take those pieces from the case, you set them together to form the text of the document. So in the case of a newspaper, guys, you're talking about a few hours to put that together. If you're working on a large book, that's going to be several days, guys. And so, time-consuming, tedious, but absolutely necessary, guys. You have to know how to set type if you're going to be a successful printer. Now, once that process is complete, we move to the press itself, and we're ready to actually print. Now, I need 2 items, guys, to make a print. I've got the letters. What's one of the things I need, guys, to make the print? Ink, of course, and paper. So in the 18th century, it was commonplace to have a team working a printing press. One person would ink, a second person would handle paper. If you had a good team, meaning they were well-trained and they had some experience, they would be making prints, guys, about every 15 to 20 seconds. So it's actually a very fast-moving process. Even though they don't have electricity, it's not as simple, guys, as pushing a button. We're working pretty fast, guys, in the 18th century. So one person takes these tools, the ink beaters, and they literally beat a coating of ink onto the surface of the press and directly onto the surface of the lead letters. Now, while the ink is being applied, the second person gets the paper ready. You've got a team of 2. Those 2 guys have to work together. So one person inks, second person grabs the paper. Paper in Franklin's time is cloth. They did not make paper out of trees. That technology is going to come around later. So this is paper, guys, that was made out of old clothes and rags. And it was oftentimes printed on when it was wet because it helped it to absorb the ink. Now, once your ink and paper's in place, you press it together. That's why this is called the printing press. And that's what ultimately produces the printed page. If you do this, guys, every 15 or 20 seconds, over the course of what might be back then a 10 or a 12-hour workday, you could actually produce a couple thousand copies on a press just like this. Doesn't mean they had to do that. They would oftentimes have a specific quota, guys, of how many items they needed. But if you were told 2,000 copies are needed, you could do that, guys, in one day on a press just like this. Now, what we're printing today are actually 3 different items on the same sheet of paper. So for Women's History Month, we've got a couple quotes there. Abigail Adams writing to her husband John, and Mary Wollstonecraft, an Englishwoman, writing about women's rights in the 1790s. And then because this is Franklin Court, we also have a brief excerpt of the final letter that George Washington wrote to Benjamin Franklin. This was sent to Franklin, guys, just a few months before his passing at the age of 84. And it shows how close a friendship, guys, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin had. They were pretty close friends during their lifetimes. This gives you an idea, guys, of the types of things that would be printed in the 18th century, or could be printed in the 18th century. Now, one final step remains. This is wet. So we're going to take this copy, guys. We are going to hang it in the racks. And there you go, guys. That's the end of the process. That's how you print in the 18th century. Are there questions today? Things that I can answer for you? Things that you might be curious about?
What's the ink made out of?
They had different recipes for ink, but one of the common recipes was tree sap, linseed oil, and lamp black, which is soot. Yes?
How much, if I wanted 1,000 copies of one of those, how much would I be paying you, and how much would you be?
I don't really know that because it would depend on a lot of different factors. Because if you came to the printer and you wanted something printed, say you had written something and you wanted them to print it would depend on so many different factors. It would depend on how much labor was going to go into setting that thing, how long it was going to take, okay, how fancy it was going to be done. So were you going to have like ornaments and special decorations and things like that? Was there going to be color printing, things like that, because they could print in different colors, but that got more expensive and more time consuming. So there's a lot of different factors, guys. There's no set answer you can give.
So back in Ben Franklin's time, color was...
There was color available, but they didn't use it a lot. Just
Okay.
too expensive and time consuming. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, wouldn't it take, like, how long would it take them to do, like, a little picture if they wanted to do, like...
Well, if you wanted to have an image, guys, and you don't see a lot of images back then, but if you wanted to have an image, more often than not, you carved it out of a block of wood. So it was a wood cut. Now, occasionally they would pay to have an image engraved, like in a copper plate, a metal plate. That was typically something that was going to be used repeatedly over and over again, like the masthead of a newspaper. You might pay to have that engraved into a metal plate. But more often than not, guys, an image was just carved out of a block of wood. So Franklin's famous cartoon, his most famous cartoon, Join or Die, most likely, guys, that was a woodcut. Yeah. Okay. Yes?
Who would buy the newspapers?
Well, newspapers, guys, were based off subscription. Now, subscriptions, guys, were a bit of a luxury. They were kind of expensive. So unless you were well-to-do, had a good amount of money, you probably didn't have a newspaper subscription, guys. But they didn't just print and then gamble that these items they printed, guys, were going to sell. They had to know that these items were going to sell. So you would oftentimes print, guys, by subscription. So things like books, newspapers, even the almanac, that was sold, guys, before it was printed.
All right, students, can we give the ranger a hand?
Thank you, guys. Okay.
Guys, we're back this way, so just say excuse me and let's head out.
All right, how many do they have?
See it again?
You too.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh yeah, my pleasure, guys.